Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my campsite out here. So I haven't been camping this year, but I wanted to, and so I figured, yeah, why don't we do a live stream while camping this morning? Because we wouldn't do a live stream if I was actually camping. So this is a happy in between. We get the best of both worlds almost, although I feel we're not actually getting much of the camping world. Although if I was camping, it would be beautiful to wake up in a place like this, have some tea in the morning, see the sunrise. I see in the chat some of you are growing things that probably you didn't want to grow, like back pain, insomnia, bewilderment. Oh, give yourselves a hug. These are things we can grow. I mean, so often we are growing. We're growing. During the daytime, I have my phone down here. I was just answering some questions on Instagram, but we could easily be growing our distraction skills during the day by practicing hardcore on our phones. It's very, very common. I see though, speaking of Instagram, earlier this week I'd put out a question on Instagram about what did people learn this year during the pandemic, because I was chatting on Twitch to Dr. Serena Guruga, and that interview will be up on YouTube probably tomorrow. And we were talking about how the pandemic had affected the mental health care system and things like that. And so I was curious about what people had learned this year, and I found it really interesting. And I'll share more of the things people learned, because there were so many responses from people actually that Instagram started to delete responses, because I guess I didn't realize there's a limit to the number of responses you can get to a question on Instagram. We surpassed it by very, very far, and so I'll share more of them today. But I was really, I think, actually surprised, and it was really fascinating to see the things people had learned this year, because so many of you mentioned, like, you really learned that you can handle difficult circumstances. You really learned about taking care of your brain, and also many people mentioned, like, they learned that when difficult things happen, mental illness explodes in their lives. But a lot of you as well learned that you can handle difficult things you didn't expect you could handle in your lives. And that's very true. You really can. Gabber Dalal, hello, welcome. Little Miss Pizza, indeed. Yeah, we have such an awesome community that we can overwhelm Instagram's expectations of interaction. It is awesome. So everybody, especially anybody new who's tuning in, or you're just watching this later on the recording, this is Hazel. YouTube tried to stop your comment there because you were so surprised. So anybody who's tuning in, this is Brain Tech Support Live, and we have these appliances, these thought emotion appliances stuck in our skulls, and they don't always work the way we want them to. So we get together, every week, whether it's here or over on Twitch, and we chat about the things we want to do for the week ahead, and the different challenges our brains may throw up, and how we can handle those challenges in a healthy way and do the things we value in life, give the things we want to give to ourselves, to our communities, and grow the things we want to keep. Even with the weirdest, strangest mental health challenges that the brain or the world around us can throw up. So the way this works, throw any questions, any mental health recovery questions you have in the chat there, and we'll explore them. And tackle mental health is something that we can tackle, that we can come together and collaborate together and support each other in making really difficult changes. And it's so important to make those changes. Not only is it important to make those changes, but then also to make those changes in a community. these really are things that are accessible. Recovery is not this weird, far off, difficult to reach place. Taking care of our mental health is something we can do together. King Kirby. Yeah, this is really common. You asked there, why is it that brain stuff often gets louder in the morning? I manage it now, but a genuine question of mine. Yeah, it's very common. And often working with people, one of the things we'll really focus in on is mornings. And I think anybody that's going to take care of their mental health, it can really help to have a great structure of supports in the mornings, precisely because it's so common that we wake up and maybe the first thing we do is check, are the intrusive thoughts there? Is that feeling there? Is today going to be a good day or a bad day? We start doing all of those compulsions immediately. Or the brain, because it's been off its leash all night, running around, it's been in your dreams throwing up the stuff you don't want to think about. You wake up and you're like, I've been dreaming about the stuff I hate all night, and we start judging and hating on it. And we're already off to the races ruminating. And so it really helps to learn how to cut out mental compulsions in the morning. One of the reasons, I'd say there's a couple of reasons why it's very common that we experience louder brain stuff in the mornings. One, we know that cortisol levels are higher in the morning. And a lot of the times, the stuff the brain is doing is just a response to things happening in our bodies. And so there's multiple things going on there, right? You've been kind of not unconscious, but you've been asleep, maybe unconscious for many hours. You're hungry, so you haven't been eating. And you've been in this kind of static rest state for quite a long time. And then maybe also you're under a lot of stress. So many of us are under so much stress. We have so much to do. Maybe we have to take care of kids, family members. We've got things at work we haven't been doing, etc. School, exams we're studying for. So we wake up and we've got all of this stuff. Suddenly we've got to control stuff in our bodies, stuff around us. And often we just immediately react to that. And so also, the brain gets used to that. And so we want to start to teach it that it doesn't have to be throwing up the stuff in the morning, but also if it does, that's okay. It's not going to change the things that we're going to do. We're not going to judge and hate on whatever it throws up in the mornings. Mm-hmm. Uday, you said how to get rid of OCD thoughts. I actually find it useful to recognize that trying to get rid of thoughts is what fuels them. The more we try to avoid and control a thought, and if we make that our focus, then it's only natural the brain is going to give it to us. It's the same cycle that happens in an addiction. If you want to take, say, some kind of drug or something to feel relief from a feeling, what happens? Right? You experience more withdrawal, right? That same feeling you wanted to get rid of, it gets bigger. So then you take even more of the drug. So then the brain gives you even more withdrawal. You take even more of the drug, you're still not getting the same relief. So you take even more of it. It creates even bigger withdrawal, and you keep going. And it really helped me on my journey to recognize the exact same thing happens with thoughts. If we want to get rid of a thought, and say we do it, we do lots of rituals and we get rid of a thought and we're like, oh, that's so good. I'm so glad I got rid of that thought. That is awesome. And then the brain sees that, and the brain wants to be very helpful. So it's like, wow, you really liked getting rid of that thought. And that thought, the brain is like this. So the brain sees I'm getting animals here. So the brain gives you a shark and you're like, that's so terrifying. I want to get rid of the shark. And you do lots of things and you wrestle the shark and you get rid of the shark. You're like, oh, that's so amazing. And then the brain sees that and it's like, oh, you liked getting rid of a shark? Oh, well, then you're really going to like getting rid of a dinosaur. And then it gives you a velociraptor, and then you have to wrestle the velociraptor. And this will just keep going. And then the brain's like, oh, you liked getting rid of a shark and a velociraptor? Well, then you'll really like getting rid of a sharkaraptor. And then it just keeps going. And it'll keep leveling up to give you the opportunity to chase the relief that you're craving. So the way to break this cycle is to stop craving that relief, because it's that's actually fueling the thoughts. See, we got some familiar faces and names in the chat. Hello, Young Jedi and Erica. Welcome. Larissa, yeah, you said, are you familiar with religious OCD? Yes. Yeah, it's very, very common, right? 'Cause so many of compulsions around OCD are about, avoiding bad things, right? And so there's often lots of morality stuff in religion, and fear of being judged, but then also the existential stuff, like what's going to happen to us after we die, and I don't want to be punished for that, and so on. So yeah, it's very, very common that exactly as I was just describing there with thoughts, inevitably the brain is going to go, oh, you're afraid of being eaten by sharks for eternity and offending the shark god? Oh, then yeah, totally the brain's going to throw that up. Gabrielle said, I've been working a lot on ACT skills, and something that's come up is feeling better, which is surprisingly scary. I'm not too sure how to handle this, oddly. Oh no, this is the scariest thing. Feeling better is the most terrifying thing. So, and I would say I experienced this too. Actually, I have an article on this that I did on a. I know you're in the same area as I am. It's on a Canadian website. It's I think I titled the article "The Most Terrifying Mental Health Experience" or something like that. And it is, it's all about the fact that the first time we don't experience anxiety, or I guess I should say, for me, it was the first time I didn't experience anxiety was the most terrifying thing I had ever experienced, because I didn't know how to function. I'd spent my whole life, as long as I could remember, the brain throws up an anxiety and uncertainty, and then I fix and control it, and then I feel happy about fixing and controlling it, and managing it. And so suddenly, when there aren't intrusive thoughts, there isn't anxiety, there's nothing for me to control and manage, I didn't know how to function. And so it's what you're experiencing there is so normal, and it's always one of the big challenges with recovery, and even I'd say like why the idea of recovery can seem very frightening to people. This idea that, oh yeah, we don't have to manage this stuff. We don't have to keep relying on this stuff. We can actually just leave it. But that itself is very terrifying, because let's say we just leave it, right? We're going to leave it behind. We don't have to experience this stuff anymore. But when that's all we've known, stepping away from that is weird, terrifying, scary. There's so much responsibility at first, and it seems daunting. What it is, in the long run, it's so much easier. It's so much easier taking care of our mental health than it is struggling with mental illness. But stepping into that and building new ways to practice happiness in our lives, is wonderful and terrifying. So I'll post the link to that article on the Discord later. But I think I'm not sure, if you Google like Mark, so actually the website's called Unsinkable. So if you Google Mark Freeman Unsinkable terrifying mental health experience, I think it should come up. And in it, so you were mentioning ACT skills. I found that ACT was, and so I talk a bunch about that in the article, ACT was what was so useful for moving out of that, because you say, okay, it doesn't matter that a feeling isn't here, because what I want to do is give my time and energy to the things that I care about in life. So enjoy doing that as you step into something that's so shocking, but really, really great. Little Miss Beats, you said, I'm seeing my psychiatrist tomorrow. I've been on medication and had the best possible experience. The first medication helped, minimal side effects, and my mental health is good. The last time I saw her a few months ago, she had already said we can probably slowly get off meds if I want to try. it's a tricky decision because one, I'm not a huge fan of chronic meds. So yes, I want to get off, but things are well, and making a change might not be necessary if things are well. What have you advised people in the past with this situation? Yeah, so I don't. I guess there's two things. So yeah, usually, I wouldn't advise anybody anything about this because my approach to medication is I don't care if somebody's taking medication or not. What I look at are the skills to handle experiences that we want to build. And so I would just say that there, like, if things are going well, I guess, and that's the thing that I would look at here. So I approach things going well as something to do with skills. And so it really helped me to see that whatever thought or feeling or whatever violent intrusive image, voice, physical sensation, etc., that my brain can throw up, things going well is about how I handle it. And that the presence or absence of those does not mean that things are going well. Because they could be there, and I'm going to do things that I value and things that I'm going to grow what I want to grow. And they could not be there, and I'm going to do things I value and grow what I want to grow. Because yeah, just like we were just talking about there with Gabriella's comment, things we could feel good, and also that itself can not necessarily be things going well. So it's really about how we handle any feeling. And so I always approach it that way. I guess I don't look at things going well. I look at, am I doing well with any experience? Yeah. So yeah, whatever path you take, you get to handle that. And you can build skills and supports around that, whichever one you choose. Mm-hmm. So Gabriella, I see you actually had a second part to your question. You said, when doing new exposures, or I guess also you had a great also when doing new exposures, is anxiety the main feeling that comes up, or can it literally be anything we don't like? Yes. For me, it's TP. And so actually it's really useful to even ditch the idea of anxiety, because then we also get into, like, you'll see a lot of people posting online because they'll say, oh, I did an exposure, but I didn't feel anxiety. And the anxiety is actually irrelevant. The brain is going to throw up, and I found this was really key to recognize. The brain doesn't care about the topic of the thoughts or the emotion, the feeling. What it cares about is getting the compulsion. So it's going to throw up whatever is going to trick you into doing the compulsions. So especially if you've been working on accepting anxiety, it's very common that you'll see the brain shift whatever it throws up to something that's going to get you to react. It never cared about anxiety. Anxiety just happened to be the feeling that at the time would get you to do compulsions. And so, yeah, when you move on, the brain is going to look for something else because it was never about the anxiety. Rithvik said, I want to be able to be present, but if my expectations are not met, especially centered around my fear of rejection, I'm not able to. Is there something that I'm supposed to do about the pain? So there's two things I would look at here. One, being present is something we do. So again, if it's not about ascribe. It's kind of like what you were saying there is, like, I want to be able to be present, but if my expectations are not met, I'm not able to. It's kind of like saying, I want to be able to ride my bike, but if there's a hill, I'm not able to. Actually, like, riding our bike is going to involve going up hills. And so I would look at, well, why? So one thing to look at is, well, why aren't you able to practice that there? But then the other thing I would also look at is that, you can see right there, those expectations are not useful. Making expectations about not getting rejected is guaranteed to always become a barrier. it can be so much more valuable to want to get rejected and want to get awesome at being rejected. Because holding on to expectations about rejection and thinking, oh, I shouldn't be rejected, I can't be rejected, it means something if I'm rejected, that's always going to create a lot of suffering. Rocking Boy, I see a question there where you said, how to skip or deal with mental compulsions and bad thoughts. Can you explain what you mean by skip? Because then you said it's hard to skip, also hard to accept. Can you explain more about what you mean? Maybe an example of where you find it hard to do that. Hazel said, is there one map to recovery you usually recommend to your clients? If so, what does it look like? Yes and no. There's a structure, but it's a unique map to each client because I'd say to each person, right? They don't have to be working with me. I'd say anybody. I'd say it's so useful to explore where you are right now and where you want to go. And then you see the journey to get there. And so that map to getting there is going to involve a unique set of changes for each person, a unique set of supports based on what's available to that person in their community and their life, the skills they already have, the skills they want to build, the challenges they'll run into, and the compulsions they want to cut out. So it's in general, in the same way that with physical fitness, you could say there is one thing, there's only one thing that everybody does, which is so if we're talking about strength or endurance, I guess you could say too, like really there is just one thing. You do a difficult thing and you support yourself in doing that difficult thing repeatedly in pursuit of the things you want to do more of in life. And the same with mental fitness. Mm-hmm. We identify where we want to go, and of course there are skills we need to build to go there. Right? Like if we say, hey, I want to run a marathon. Okay, and the training program is going to be kind of unique to each person based on where you are and the context of that. But there's going to be one thing each of those people do, which is run, starting small and building up, pushing into that urge to stop and continuing on and supporting that, caring for yourself, fueling that practice as you develop the skill to go where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And the same is true with mental fitness. Robin, you said, what does recovery mean to you? If recovery is a practice, then how do I track my long-term progress? And so exactly what I was just talking about there. So I would say that recovery is the practice of being yourself while having any thought or feeling. And so that idea of being yourself. So it's really about saying, like, where do you want to go? And we track progress then by going there. So we actually don't have to track it as recovery. So I would even say to everybody, I'd say, just be recovered now. Right? Just like in physical fitness, we're not constantly going, hey, have you recovered from your strength disorder? Or you don't ever go like, well, after I recovered from my endurance disorder. No, like you just work on building skills. And of course, it's understood that there's always going to be more skills to build. We can always work on capacity. And of course, if we stop doing healthy things, if we stop supporting ourselves, it's only natural that those practices we wanted to do would become more challenging. So for tracking progress, I would track those practices I want to keep in my life. So it's about, whatever it is you want to do more of in life, tracking that. Mm-hmm. Soup Cup, welcome. Oh, Erica, thank you so much for the donation with trees. I appreciate it. That's very appropriate. We are out here in the wilderness, under the trees you've just donated. Thank you. Anshul said, I've developed many compulsions around breathing, including physical sensations. I always find myself controlling breathing. Actually, I am hyper aware of my senses. So let's talk about the sense. Often these are referred to as sensory motor compulsions, obsessions. It really helps to see that they are the same as anything else. Like, we end up reacting to, you could say, an intrusive physical sensation or an uncertainty about something in our body in the same way we would to a thought, an intrusive thought in our heads about, oh, did you do this? Did this bad thing happen? And stuff like that. And so one is seeing that they are the same. So us judging it, oh, that's bad, I should react to that, is a compulsion. Us checking it, oh, is it still there? Us judging the feeling, like, oh, I want to get rid of this. I don't like this. I need to make it go away. All of those same compulsions that we do on other things, they also apply to the sensory motor symptoms. One exercise that I often recommend to people to start with this is on my YouTube channel. So if you look up sensory motor somatic busting exercise number 1, it's let me I'll just pull it up here. Sensory motor, yeah, here it goes. I'll get you a link. It's gonna play some ad music. I'm gonna throw the link down in the chat below. So this is about a meditation exercise, and you can also find the meditation exercise on my channel. This is kind of explaining it. This is about learning how to cut out the judgment and controlling compulsions around physical sensations. Because of course, it all starts with us judging, ooh, that shouldn't be there. Ooh, I've got to control that. Or checking, like, is it okay? And then of course, it's not going to be okay because we're checking it. So learning how to cut out compulsions around ourselves is just as important as cutting out compulsions around anything else, any other uncertainty the brain can come up with. Hazel. And I see, yeah, Little Miss Beats down below is talking to you about this question about being confident in our recovery. Yeah. Oh, John, I see you mentioned yesterday I experienced road rage, and I feel super ashamed about it. It's okay. It's useful to notice these things. Like road rage is a great example of a controlling compulsion. And looking at any experience like that, where we see it happen, and then we can go back and explore, like, how did that happen? We see the compulsions, the shoulds, like, we start judging people. They shouldn't have done that. They should have done this. And you see that problem-solving monster come up inside of us. Well, like, I want to fix that. I deserve some kind of, we get into a very transactional mode. I deserve some kind of compensation for this bad thing. And just understanding that machinery helps us start to dismantle it and say, okay, yeah, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. So next time, here's how I'm going to get ahead of it. And here's how I'm going to make changes around it. It's great you can see it and talk about it. So much of all of this work we do really depends on us being able to bring up these things and say, hey, here's the thing. I can touch it. Yeah, it's painful. Yeah, I didn't want to do that. Okay. How am I going to do it differently next time? And we can touch that. We don't have to pretend like it doesn't happen. We can touch it, understand it, give ourselves a hug with compassion, and make changes. Yes. Kiki00 said, can you bring on thoughts yourself regarding your OCD theme as a compulsion? I'm struggling to work out if it's just thoughts or compulsions. Yeah, it's really useful to watch out for doing, like ERP, or especially if somebody's seeing it as like, oh, I'm going to go and do exposures. Usually that ends up being a compulsion. And especially if we're bringing up thoughts because we want to check how we react to them, because we're like, oh, I still hate the thought. That's just a form of reassurance, right? We're like, oh, I still hate the thought. That's good, because that means I don't like it. That's going to end up with not feeling that anxiety around the thoughts, which then we get even more anxious about. So the brain, it really helped me see, the brain can do anything. It can throw up anything, and really embrace that. That's fine. It can throw it up. It can also not throw it up. What I want to give my time and energy to is doing the things that I really care about in life. Michael said, I've been doing much better. So thank you. You're doing all of the work. However, I'm experiencing insomnia. I've even allowed myself to not sleep. That doesn't always help. Ideas. So one of the things I look at with insomnia is, one, looking more at the rest of the day is often where it's useful to make changes. But it would really depend on when you say you're experiencing insomnia, like what's happening there, and what in particular, what are you doing in your head? Would be I'd have a lot of questions before we could explore any ideas, but those would be the questions I'd ask first. Maja, you said, I know we always say we wouldn't judge the clouds, but I catch myself so often judging the weather. This is a half joke, but I feel like sometimes I think bad weather will be a bad day. Yeah, it's really useful to see our judgments and look at our beliefs, because sometimes, we'll have beliefs about all sorts of different things where we say, oh, if that thing is there, that sucks, and it's gonna, because it could even be an event, or a person who's somewhere, or something that happens at work, and we're like, oh, if that happens, then the whole project's ruined, the whole event is going to suck, it's going to be boring, it's going to be bad weather, the day is going to be miserable, etc. And so really exploring our beliefs around that stuff, and asking, well, what would be a more useful belief, but then also exploring, how can I enjoy bad weather, and shifting some power back to us. Because what happens with any of these things where we see the thing, we judge, and we're like, oh, now it's going to suck, is that we're kicking away all of our power in that situation, right? I don't have any power. That thing has power, and now it's going to control my experience. What it can really help to look at is not having to change that thing, because that thing may suck. Like, let's take the weather. Like say there's a tornado. Yes, there's a tornado. We don't have to pretend like tornadoes are good. How are we going to handle that tornado in a way that's positive for us? And it might not be as extreme as a tornado. Maybe it's just a boring class at school. Okay, but if I've got to take that class, it's going to be useful to me to enjoy taking that class. So yes, it is boring. Maybe the professor, I don't like the professor. Okay, I don't have to pretend I like the professor, but how am I going to enjoy the class? Because it's useful to me to enjoy it, since I have to be there. And so taking that approach, right, that we don't, in the wilderness metaphor that I often use, it's about getting excited and curious about the swamp. So we have to walk through a swamp, but can we be curious and interested in what's in the swamp? Can we approach it with curiosity and wonder? It's still a swamp, but maybe there's some cool stuff in there. MD Firdaus, He said, ACT says we try to avoid bad experiences by relaxation, positive thinking, meditation, analyzing thoughts, eating food. So does this mean we should not do such things? Can you elaborate? No, I mean, I still eat food, but I had many food compulsions in the past. I wash my hands, but I had hand washing compulsions in the past. I meditate, but I don't meditate to like fix or control something in my head. And so that's really what it comes down to. We can turn anything into a compulsion if we're doing it to avoid and control experiences. And so even like what you mentioned there is what I call in You Are Not a Rock or the Mind Workout, the coping compulsions. And so it doesn't mean that we don't then do things to relax. It's about getting proactive with them. So what I always encourage people to do, and this is something everybody can do, and looking at your week ahead, is look at how you're going to relax and take breaks proactively. You don't have to wait until you hit rock bottom. Or you don't have to wait until your garden is all shriveled up to give it water. We want to water and nourish ourselves proactively so that we thrive, rather than always waiting until there's something bad and then trying to fix it. So yeah, with all of those things you mentioned, like relaxation, meditation, but then although you mentioned analyzing thoughts, I don't know if I would ever do that. I don't think that would be relaxing either. That would analyzing thoughts would create a lot more struggle. But things like eating food, even it's really great to eat food consistently. You don't have to wait until you get hungry and then be like, oh, I'm hungry, I should go and eat something. No, you need food. You need nourishment to fuel doing awesome things in life. So you don't have to wait until there's a painful feeling to fix. Mm-hmm. Oh, Marlos, yeah, you said, I was wondering, I have a lot of clothes I can't wear because I'm scared they're bad. Like bad things will happen when I wear them. And so choosing to wear them makes me feel selfish. Do you feel like taking it step by step, wearing it for 1 hour a day and just build it up is just as effective as just letting go and wearing everything? It feels too overwhelming to just do everything I value and not do compulsions. A very all or nothing approach. Yeah, so there's a couple things. And so it's this going back to the discussion or question earlier about is there one map for everyone? This is a great example because this compulsion comes up a lot. A lot of people struggle, even when people believe they have lucky clothes. They're still doing this same compulsion around attaching meaning and magical thinking to clothes. And it's a very common compulsion. And I find that it really depends on the person when it comes to cutting out the compulsion. And so I'll explain some of the different ways that I've seen people approach it. So yeah, some people, like you said, like putting it on for an hour could be a way to approach it, to just start to show the brain, hey, no, like this isn't such a bad thing. Like, look, we can wear it and enjoy it. However, what I'd watch out for with that approach is checking afterwards. So if you know you're doing that because it gives you this opportunity to wear it for an hour, and then, so if it's a fear of some bad thing happening to a family member or to you, if you wear it for an hour and then you get to confirm that a bad thing didn't happen, that is not going to be helpful. So if it becomes this like reassurance seeking, or I find another thing sometimes people will do with this, they'll try to figure out the clothes that feel a bit safer, and they'll kind of bargain with the brain and be like, oh, well, this piece of clothing isn't as bad or associated with such bad things, therefore I can wear it. And we think that's good, but what we're doing in that moment is creating this bargain with the brain where we've essentially said, yes, brain, those other clothes, they are dangerous. And actually, although it can seem easier in the moment, you may actually be making it harder because you're just confirming to the brain that the stuff it throws up is legit. And so then the brain later on is going to be like, no, you agreed that these were the dangerous clothes. So now you have to stick to safe clothes. And then it'll start to work its way backwards. So one thing I find really key with this is keeping the focus on, like we were just talking about there, not controlling something. It's not about I'm going to, wear the safer clothes, or I'm going to wear the piece of clothing and check to make sure a bad thing doesn't happen. It's really useful to make this about, I want to wear the clothes that I want to wear. So this week, I am going to, in advance, determine, hey, on one of these days coming up this week, I am going to wear a piece of clothing that I believe, a piece of clothing I've been avoiding, but I'm really going to enjoy wearing it to this particular event. Because maybe, it's, winter where you are, and it's a sweater, and you're like, this is going to be so warm, and I'm going to enjoy it so much. And so I'm going to do that. And yes, brain, when I wear that, of course, all sorts of bad things are going to happen, but at least I'll be warm and then enjoy it. Or if it's summer, it could be, something really summery and nice. And it's about you enjoying it and you using it in a way that's going to support you living. And what I would do then is over time build up that practice. Seeing, each week I want to wear the clothes that I want to wear more and more, and grow it around something you want to keep. Yeah. So see, because like you said, it may feel too overwhelming to just do everything you value, and so that's kind of the idea there. But you'll see within that, though, it's not. It's built around, hey, I want to wear this to the thing I want to wear it to. So maybe it's an event that isn't all day. So you do give your permission to change clothes after that event. But I do find it's more useful to go, in a sense, it's still going all in, just a smaller amount, right? Like, I am going to wear this piece of clothing, period, to a thing I want to wear it to, because that's a thing I do. And the brain can throw up whatever it wants to throw up, because brains do that. We don't have to listen to our brains anymore, which is great. Squidge, hello. He said, is there a way to notice if I'm dropping plates to help me do what I value versus avoiding things, shrinking my world? I think it's always gonna be, the brain's always gonna want to debate it. And for anybody who's not familiar with dropping plates, this is something we were talking about. We've talked about it on a bunch of other streams. So I have to describe it as like when we don't want to let anything bad happen. And of course, we often want to do all of the things. We end up holding all of these plates and we get overwhelmed, and we don't want to drop any of them. And it's so useful to start to drop some and say, hey, that thing you wanted me to do, I can't do it. Or just flat out refuse things. And some people may be upset, or something will break. Yeah, but we look at what's most important to us and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I can't hold all these plates, but these 3 plates right here, these are the most important to me. So I'm going to hold them, and I'm willing to drop some of these other plates. I just hit my mug here too. I almost dropped my mug. It would have been a great demonstration. Although my mug is important to me. I'll have a sip before it gets destroyed. The thing then that I look at to this question you asked is really understanding what those things are that are most important. And so that's also what helps me push ahead sometimes too, because I'll notice maybe that I am really busy, but maybe I do want to push myself a bit with some things because they are the most important to me. So then what I look at is, what can I change around the things that aren't most important to me? And sometimes, it could be like personally doing the work that I do. Sometimes I will be super busy. But I also want to nourish myself. But I might say, hey, you know what? I really care about doing this work I'm doing. And so actually, it would have been nice to take some time to go and cook a meal today, but I'd rather keep working on this, and I'm just going to order food because I need to nourish myself. And so, yeah, it's going to be more expensive and I don't want to have to spend the money on that, but I'm willing to invest in that to do more of this work that I really care about because it's actually most important to me. And so, yeah, that's what helps me push ahead, is a really clear alignment on what's most important. Oh, no name. Thank you very much for the kind comment. I'm glad you found these tools really helpful. Yeah, and that's, yeah, like you said, a lot of these tools end up being, helpful sometimes more so than what we may access in the mental health care system, and that was the reason for doing that. And even as you've seen some of the streams on Twitch, we've been sharing, kind of walking through different mental health exercises, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that. I think on streams, probably we'll do them on Twitch, but then I'll share them on YouTube as well. Go like walking through how to do things like ERP and ACT exercises around specific compulsions and stuff like that. Because this isn't some weird secret stuff. We really can open source it and collaborate together on making really healthy, useful changes around mental health. We can make these skills accessible. And so I'm glad you found that useful on your adventures. So Kai, you asked, how did you learn so much about the OCD brain? It was, having to go through the journey from having, relatively severe OCD to not having it. And then, it's been 9 years of working with, building a community online around these skills. And so I'm like 10 or 11 years post recovery. And I think, you just, over time, it's approaching it like fitness, right? It's about how do we change effectively and sustain those changes. And that's very human. Oh, Nicole, you're tuning in and making a veggie pasta salad. That sounds delicious. Please enjoy. Oh, wow. Yeah, Squid, you just found like cats in boxes emojis. I didn't know we had that. Oh, Pom Pom Kitty, thank you. Thank you for being part of the community. Arfaj said, how to come into terms with something that has hurt us in the past so it doesn't keep us as hurt constantly forward. I found healing the inner child meditation as a meditation practice, but then also as an understanding we can really take throughout our lives, was so valuable, because it really is about recognizing that if something happened in the past, it's kind of like getting an injury. Like, let's say you get a shoulder injury or a leg injury while you're out hiking, maybe while I was out camping, get a bad injury. And then, even though we may say, oh, that was in the past, I've moved on, some scar tissue forms over top of it. And then we always notice when we try to do something similar in the future, there's a bit of pain there. There's that scar tissue around our shoulder, our knees, and we don't move in the same way because we don't want to make that pain come up. And so it begins to restrict our mobility in life. And the same thing happens with emotional experiences. Even if we don't think they're that bad, a lot of the times it's not something we'd see as trauma, as like this big thing. So not capital T trauma, but maybe little t trauma, just because it's an uncertainty. It's a painful experience. And then we tried to control it. We practiced some controlling behaviors around it. Maybe that worked for us at the time, but that controlling behavior becomes the scar tissue. And it's there in the present, even though the wound is healed. And so the healing the inner child meditation practice and then bringing it into our lives is all about digging into those wounds and breaking them up and bringing healing to that scar tissue, bringing love and kindness to melt that emotional scar tissue so that we can start to move through our lives in the same way, or move through our lives with that full range of mobility. So not in the same way, because moving in the same way is what created the injury the first time, but move in different ways with mobility. And so that's also what the practice then is about in the moment, is when we notice that pain, we notice that urge to kind of move in a way that's restrictive, but instead we give ourselves that love and that kindness and we move differently. We show our younger selves. We see that our younger selves who were hurt, they're here in this moment. And we can reach out a hand to them because they're scared. And we can show them how to do things differently, how to step into fear and anxiety in this moment and do the things they want to do in life and live the way they want to live and move fully in life. And that's really what it's about. And so, yeah, when I first heard a term like healing the inner child, I was like, that sounds fluffy. But in reality, it's a really valuable practice. It's really challenging. It's okay to cry. And so, yeah, there are a bunch of healing the inner child and loving kindness meditation tracks on my channel, but you can find many online. People in the Discord server were sharing a great one the other day and talking about how useful they found that. And so that's where I would start. See that pain from the past, it's real, it's here in the present, and we can touch it. We can dig into it. We can break it down and bring mobility back into our lives. Alex, so kind of similar here. You said, I often find myself traveling to the past, wanting to go back in time because I have regrets about things I did or didn't do. How to approach this, like intrusive thoughts and focusing in the present. So actually hiking is the example I often use with this. So it's a bit like in the past, we wandered off the path or we tripped over a tree root. And what we do though then is we dig up the tree and we're like, oh, I really hated that I did this. I've got to go find some resolution to this mistake, this tree that I tripped on. But of course, dragging around a tree is only going to interfere with our journey ahead. And so often I find it's, wanting to get the resolution or closure, wanting to get some kind of payment for our regrets in the past is only going to interfere with our journey in the present. And so what really helps me, when you touch that pain from the past, and this is often what comes up during the healing the inner child meditation. Because if you've ever done the relapse diagnostic course that's on thetoolkitstore.com, it has a healing the inner child meditation in it that I call healing the inner screw up child. Because often one of the things that we end up hating on and regretting are relapses, right? When we wander off the path. And it's so useful to touch that pain and understand why we did that. Understand why at the time doing those compulsions or doing that thing we didn't want to do, like we were talking about earlier with the road rage, why did we do that? It's useful to touch that and understand that. And then in this moment, give us what we were looking for then. Recognizing, we don't need to chase that from outside of us. We can be the source of that love, that validation, that respect, that control, that power. But it doesn't mean that there's something bad about that need. It's useful to recognize it and understand, at the time, given the tools that we had available to us, given what we'd learned in life, the way we tried to control that need, the way we tried to fulfill that need, that's what we did. It wasn't useful to us. Now we can see that, and now we know healthier ways to supply that need and fulfill it. And so that's what we can do in the present. Oh, Hazel, one of my favorite topics. I said, is it okay to have lazy days where we don't accomplish much? Yes, because your value is not determined by, I don't know, like random goalposts you pass. Your value is not determined by accomplishing things. It's so useful to learn how to enjoy being and see your value and worth is inherent. So simply doing nothing is great because there's no more value you could possibly have than simply being you. And when we take that approach, right, because at first we think, oh, well, then you won't accomplish things in life or you won't be successful, blah, blah, all of that kind of stuff. But the reality is, if we really value ourselves and see our worth in simply being and define that as success, then we have lots of success to spend and we can actually do much more. So I see Erica down below mentioned having a lazy day, and a lazy day is a wonderful thing to explore. And yeah, Squidge, as you mentioned there, we often talk about lazy days on the Discord. Yeah, and so it's a practice weekly in Plum Village. And so yeah, if you whether you join the Discord server, feel free to ask about lazy days on there. Let's throw a Discord server invite down below. So yeah, feel free to ask about lazy days on the Discord server. Maybe we can all plan one soon and share about it. Or just Google Plum Village lazy days, and you'll see a description of how lazy days are practiced at Plum Village. A lazy day is a great time. It's a fantastic mental fitness exercise because this is one of the things going all the way back to what Gabriella mentioned earlier about the fear of like not having anxiety. Is that one of the challenges there is that we've come to rely on anxiety. So the stuff we hate, we depend on it. So it's very challenging to walk away from it. But likewise, what we notice with a lazy day is that we've come to depend on pressure and stress to fuel living. Okay? We've come to rely on the fear of not accomplishing things to make us do stuff. And so when we step away from that, it's very challenging. And even your brain may react by like throwing up lots of intrusive thoughts at first on a lazy day, because it's like, what are you doing? You need something? I will give you something to control. But we want to start to show the brain, hey, we don't need to control stuff. We don't need to do anything. We can just be. And that is enough. Nicole, yeah, you mentioned I'm said, I think I'm going to try on the perspective of not trying to get recovery. Yeah. Anytime we're trying to get stuff, it just so often leads to the exact opposite. I like to switch the focus to giving. And so much of the mental health journey has been about making a switch from getting to giving. And that includes the way of approaching mental health. Right? I want to look instead at, what do I want to give to myself? What do I want to give to others? I don't have to do anything with thoughts or feelings or voices or intrusive images or physical sensations or whatever. I can have those and I can give. Alex, you said, how do you recommend to start cutting out compulsions in your experience, like the hierarchy exercise in your book? My therapist told me every day is an exposure, so maybe there's no need to do a list. Yeah, I find it useful to recognize every day is an exposure. That you don't have to worry about exposures. Your brain will take care of that. And instead, I find it more useful, and so I talk about this in the book too, like a reverse hierarchy can often be the more useful thing to start with. And that's actually just looking at the things you want to add into your life. Because anything to do with mental health that we talk about here is really about getting good at change. And humans struggle with change. So starting with the reverse hierarchy, just adding in things you want to do more of, can be a really useful way to learn about change without the pressure of lots of stressors and things like that. At the same time, of course, if you just try to do more of a thing you want to do, yeah, the brain's going to try to interfere with it. And then you have the opportunity to cut out compulsions while also learning how to just sustain something that's useful to you. Narina teacher, how do you stop obsessions from evolving and changing? How do you know if your OCD has changed to puro, or if you're fully recovered? So one thing that I find really helpful is saying that it actually doesn't change. The superficial topic of an obsession changes, but it's still us judging something, ooh, that's bad, and then doing lots of checking and controlling. So it's really useful to tackle it at that pattern level, because that's why it keeps changing, right? When we interact with the topic instead of the compulsive pattern, then the brain can just go from one to the next because we're approaching it as different. Instead of recognizing, hey, you know what, no matter what uncertainty my brain throws up, I don't have to check on it. So it doesn't matter if the brain says, hey, do you have a horrible disease? Or, hey, what if you're not real? Or, hey, what if you're going to lose your mind? Or, hey, like, what if you're going to do something that's going to cause bad things to happen to other people? Just recognizing those are all the same. They're not actually different. Because all it is me judging something in my head and going, oh no, I've got to do something about that. And then doing lots of unhealthy things as a reaction to it. So when we take it down to that level, then it becomes much simpler. The brain can't come up with anything new because everything the brain comes up with is the same, right? It's just more brain stuff. Now, you also asked about how do you know if your OCD has changed to pure O? So it's really useful to recognize puro is like just another one of these terms that we use online to talk about, particular symptoms. But it's not, and even OCD itself is also just a term we use to talk about particular symptoms. They aren't like real in the sense that, there is something that's changed. They are just ways of talking about symptoms. So it is still the same stuff. Joseph, can you explain? So you asked here, I have a question. What about uncertainties that we need to make? Like, what if I got a mail from my boss? What about the judgments that are actually necessary? Like, this thing is dangerous. Can you explain a bit more about what you mean? Or actually, I think Squidge gave you a great response down below. Yeah, so Squidge, here, I'll read out what Squidge said because this is really useful. So Squidge said, judgments are superpower. We can notice our judgments and use that information if we need to. Non-judgment just means noticing something as it is. That might be noticing danger. Exactly, yeah. Like judgment, the example I use in my book is the kid who gets in the tiger cage. The kid gets eaten. It's not about pretending things aren't the way they are. But where it would come up is, and so you mentioned the example of your, what if it's an email from your boss? There, I would say you can see like judgments getting thrown in, right? Like, do you believe you're going to get fired? And all the judgments that go along with that. Do you believe your boss is judging you? Because what I often give as an example, when it's the first exercise in my book is about learning how to stop compulsively checking your phone. And the example I give there is to accept, maybe you just got a really, really important message from your boss. And oh, look, like, because you didn't answer it right away, you're going to get fired. Because you can see the fear there. We're so afraid. Yes, Elena said, my doctors, therapists, etc., have always said doing the things that make you anxious will over time make them easier and the anxiety will lessen. Years of doing those things and my anxiety is worse. That's really useful to notice. So I would define what they were saying there as a compulsion. Right? A compulsion, anytime we're doing something to control and avoid feelings, that's only naturally going to make it worse. I would not, if we approach things as like, I'm going to do this to make anxiety get less, I would expect it to grow. it's the same as, like, to give an example that sometimes people will understand more, it's the same as what happens with a contamination compulsion. So say somebody's washing because they want to get rid of a dirty feeling, because they think bad things will happen if they don't get rid of this dirty feeling. And so what's going to happen there? They're going to feel it more, and they're going to have to wash more, which is only going to make them notice it more and find, oh, I washed and I still did not get rid of that feeling. I've got to do it more. And it just grows and grows and grows, and they have to do more and more to get rid of the feeling, which only creates more and more of the feeling. And it's kind of like, it's like brain physics. Yeah, the more we try and avoid and control a feeling, the more the brain gives it to us. Brain's helpful for something. I don't know what, but like something. I'm sure we wouldn't. I guess there's a appendix. We do have kind of like organs. Do we count the appendix as an organ, or is it just like a dangly thing in our bodies? Maybe the brain's just like that. It's like a dangly thing on top of your spine. See, I forgot where the brain was for a moment. Team spleen here. Brains aren't as useful as spleens. Dalal, maybe can you explain a bit more about your question? I'm not sure what you mean by after it has been cleaned, how does one move forward? Oh, Nicole, yeah, I see you're so exhausted scheduling breaks this week. Enjoy those breaks. It's going to be, showing your brain, hey, brain, we don't have to do anything. The brain's going to be like, what about this? And be like, no, you don't have to do anything. What about this? No. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. Oh, Jesse, yeah, I said, I recently started to cut out so many compulsions. I realized how delusional my brain is from repeating thoughts that I thought were normal. I'm getting clear from cutting them out. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Hey, thank you for doing that work. Yeah, it's super intense. As you see, yeah, the stuff the brain throws up, it's really useful to take a step back and consider what's actually useful to us. Oh, Borth, this is a great one. It's researching what the next piece of gear or software I should get in order to support my creative work has become an obstacle to me actually working. What can you recommend to prevent situations where the supports are quite valuable, but they're beginning to suppress the actual activity? Yeah, this is really common to run into. What I often suggest to people is coming up with a framework built around values. This is a great place where we put values into action that helps us decide how we decide. So before doing any purchasing, and practice this, you can do this with everything. Getting a new phone, getting a house, finding a new place, a new job, etc. How are you going to decide how you decide? And you put a time limit on it. So it's also about taking that step back and saying, hey, in 30 minutes, I'm going to, and actually I can think of an example where I did this, because I have my tablet sitting right here. You say, look, in 30 minutes, I'm going to find the best tablet for my work, and I'm going to order it. Because the brain wants to keep on going forever and ever. And so then also to help us do that, though, we identify what's most important. So always pick one value that's most important. So I know, like, when I was doing my tablet, the thing that was most important to me was brush sensitivity. And so on a tablet, there's actually, you get a range on that. And because depending on the different tablet, it can really vary. And that's what gives you that like really nice, like kind of pen brush look. And that's what I was looking for the most. That was the number one thing. So immediately I'm just going through and finding, the top tablets that meet that criteria. And then also, in addition to the most important criteria, you pick 2 other criteria, or maybe 3, that you're also going to score it on. And then you very quickly you don't even have to, you could do a spreadsheet, grab a piece of paper, you write down your 4 criteria with the most important at the top. And then you just score, and you only have 30 minutes. So you might say, look, I'm gonna, I've only got maybe 20 minutes to do, find just researching, 20 minutes to research, find a bunch of options, look at a couple reviews, look at a couple examples. I'm going to score them. And then at the end, I pick based on the score. And the most important value at the top, it's going to be the tiebreaker for any scores that tie. And you walk away. And just finding a framework like that, that's going to be useful to you, that reflects the things that you care about, is so useful to put into practice. Because we don't have to spend all this time obsessing and thinking about things. Because as you've seen, it just becomes a barrier. So yeah, enjoy making decisions quickly and giving yourself that trust. Yeah, trusting in what you value, trusting in yourself to identify what's important. Neon Purple said, I said, when we chase feelings, we get the opposite. Will the brain perceive that false opposite feelings are real? Thinking about that made me relapse and increase dissociation. So I would the whole idea that there's like false opposite feelings. So I would find that the compulsion, like even just checking, like if you're judging and checking, oh, does this feel real? Yeah, like that's, like you said, it's going to lead to a lot of relapsing and dissociation. Dissociation is all about checking feelings and judging them. And so if you're checking feelings and saying, oh, a feeling has to be real, then of course it's not going to feel real, which is then going to lead to all the dissociation, depersonalization, derealization, and all of that. Yeah, so it's really not useful to get caught up in all that checking and judging feelings. Right. Said, how'd you deal with overwhelming physical symptoms? Once I start cutting out more compulsions, the anxiety gets so bad, I barely sleep. I wake up early, which in turn makes the fatigue, anxiety so bad. Yeah, what you're running into is really common. There were some compulsions where I was cutting them out. Like I have a video on headaches that would come along, and they were very unique headaches that I had never experienced before and have never experienced again. And they just felt, I described it as, it felt like my brain was peeling off of my skull. It always felt like this weird tingling pain, like pins and needles in my skull. So there was that. There were some compulsions, when I would cut them out, I would just fall asleep. It was so intense to not do the compulsion that it could be any time of day. I would just feel like, oh, I've just got to lay down, and then I would pass out. Whatever the physical sensations, often we have a lot of physical, like intestinal issues can come up, the works. Totally normal. And I find it's about sticking to those things that I care about, being able to say, like, look, you know what, whatever, and this is the thing, doing things I value is about doing them with whatever the brain throws up and seeing into. So if the brain is throwing up weird things around sleep, around digestion, around whatever, I'm still going to do the things that I value. And really making sure that we are bringing things into our lives that are supporting us, and making space for that. Working on tiredness was something I had to work on in the same way I worked on anxiety, because I would react to, I really thought, I couldn't feel tired. In the same way I was like, I can't feel anxious, or I can't have intrusive thoughts. And so it was really useful to learn, how do I support myself while being tired, so that I can continue to do the things that I want to do, that I really value doing in life. And just always having that focus. Okay, like I'm really uncomfortable. I'm really tired. How am I going to support myself? And at the same time, noticing that when we're making big changes, you're gonna run into rough experiences. So is there a way to make space for that in our lives? Like, we don't have to pretend like we're not doing something challenging. So also really valuing, like, it really helped me to value the importance of that and say, look, I know I'm gonna be cutting out some really difficult compulsions. I know that's gonna affect my body. So yeah, maybe I'm not going to pile a whole ton of things into my schedule this week, because I am doing something that is so much more valuable than all of those other things I could possibly schedule in this week. And making that space for yourself. and giving it that importance. It's really useful. So yeah, be kind to yourself as you journey through this wilderness. The wilderness can be challenging. We do get sore, right? And that's the thing. I was like, with physical fitness, if we're doing like really intense training, of course things are going to happen to our bodies. And yet actually sleep, ending up waking up early, not being able to sleep because we've been training so much, being so sore, being woken up in the middle of the night because your calves have seized up. All of those things can happen. But when it's physical fitness, we tend to recognize it more and accept it. Whereas I think with mental health, for some reason, we see it as like, even though I'm making a huge change, a change that I've never made in my entire life, we expect it to feel good. And the reality is that it often does not. Making big changes is uncomfortable. Oh, Azil, thank you so much. I'm glad you're finding this stuff useful. Nicole, yes, those plates you've been holding for years, you can drop them. Oh, Jesse, King of Kings, I see the donation. I'm just getting caught up here. Thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate the support. I love the emoji there too, leveling up. Please do keep on leveling up. Marlos, yeah, I hope you start, choosing things for you. Yeah, you can see there, your brain tells you don't deserve the things. Absolutely. You can wear that because you value loving yourself. So yeah, this is something to look at. You said it feels like if I say that I like myself more than other people, you learn not to be selfish. So how do you find self-love when everything you do feels wrong? Yeah, you steal it. Yeah, it really. This is something because the brain will keep knocking us down. We say there's this bad accountant in our heads who always puts us in debt, who always says we don't have the funds of self-love to give to ourselves. We've got to pay them back. No, you're not in debt. Spend it. Give it to yourself. Give that love and kindness to yourself. And yeah, it'll often feel like you're stealing it. So steal more love and kindness for yourself and really, elevate yourself and give to yourself. Because when we are giving that kindness to ourselves, we actually have much more to give to others. It's like taking care of a garden again. If we're like, oh, I don't want to care for my garden because I should be caring for other people's gardens, and then you just go and care for other people's gardens, well, your garden is going to die. And then, of course you don't have anything to give to other people because you have no vegetables. Yeah. So take care of your garden and help it flourish, and then you'll have lots of vegetables to share. Lisa. Yeah, as you said, the more I hear Mark talk about busyness, the more I think that it can be okay. It's about how we approaching it lightly. Yeah, and I hear the lightness of it is so key. That I find I can actually do so much more now. I'd say it's such a huge benefit of taking care of my mental health. Because the stuff we used to do, the stuff I would do in my head all the time, all the ruminating, that's so exhausting. All the time travel, also extra exhausting. Very difficult to time travel. Takes a lot of work, takes a lot of energy. So being present and doing things I care about inside and outside of my head, really does allow me to do much more. And also I can be very light with it. So if I'm doing something I'd see as important in the past, I can do that right now. And also I can go and do something else important right after. And I don't have to control it in the way that I would have in the past. And so it's actually, learning how to move very lightly between things. And then we can do so much more because it's not exhausting. But we can also walk away. I would say I have a great relaxation practice. And I think this is a thing, this is where I found, fitness so useful and things like CrossFit, because you very quickly understand how important rest is to performing at a high level. And the same goes for work. Yeah, it's not just about go, 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 because of course you burn out. You actually want to, pace yourself and be very good at resting. And when you're resting, shutting everything down, turning off all the superpowers. And then when you want to go again, you can approach it with all of your superpowers. And so we have to get awesome at rest in the same way we spend so much effort trying to build skills in other areas. So let us be good at rest. That's, yeah, like there was a moment yesterday I was out for a walk, and so I don't have my phone with me. Actually, I think it was two. I was going for a run, and then I was walking afterwards to go and run some errands. And yeah, like I don't have my phone with me doing that. And I think recognizing, especially if if you're never disconnected each day, that could be something to look at. It's really useful to learn, hey, there are times when I'm connected, and when I'm connected, I'm fully connected. I'm happy to, answer any question or do anything. But then, yeah, when I'm not connected, I'm not connected. Mm-hmm. That's not, it's showing the brain, yeah, we're not, we don't have to do those things. Zeal. He said, how can I cut compulsions without falling into reassurance? I find myself doing that a lot. Yeah, can you maybe explain how, when you're cutting out the compulsions, can you explain a bit more about how you end up falling back into the reassurance? Masa said, what's your meditation routine? As in the techniques, there's so many types of great meditations like mindfulness, loving kindness, and as you mentioned now, healing the inner child. Yeah, so my favorite type of meditation or style of meditation is what's known as silent illumination or just sitting meditation. And you silent, not just around you, but inside your head as well. And so I found that exploring, and so it's a type of Zen meditation. And I found exploring that was one of the best ways to learn about shutting up the brain. That, yeah, we can sit there with a quiet brain. And it's such a useful skill to learn how to invite your brain to sit down with you and shut up. Because then we can take that skill throughout our lives. When the brain, starts spinning on the rat wheel, we can stop the wheel and be, hey, rat, just chill. There's nothing to do right now. Got nowhere to go. Just sit. And I want to give my attention to my other senses. So I'm a big fan of silent illumination or just sitting meditation. At the same time, I find like the other types of meditation we bring up, they're great practices to learn how to do too. That it really is like approaching meditation like a physical fitness practice. So yeah, there's going to be particular exercises we really like. And in the same way, somebody might say, oh, like I just really like running long distance. And so find the practice in meditation that you really want to enjoy and develop a deep practice in. At the same time, don't ignore all of the other areas of fitness or all the other areas of meditation, because you're exploring them is also going to give you great support or great resources that deepen the practice around the thing you do enjoy the most. Mas, I see, yeah, you explained more below. You said, I currently do daily mindfulness of the breath, so Vipassana meditation, 30 to 60 minutes, and it alone with mindfulness has helped me get where I am. That's great. I think if you enjoy Vipassana meditation, you'll find just sitting or silent illumination quite similar. They are taking a slightly different approach to get to the same place. Quintinator. It's a cool name. said, I have had an obsessive thought for some time, and I presume the best thing to do is ignore it or go to the root of it, or maybe exposure and response prevention. I don't know. I'm a little confused. Yeah, so I would start actually not with the obsessive thought, because that always gets us into this, like, well, what do I do about it? And seeing that in many ways, the what do I do with it? How do I deal with it is the problem. So what I would look at instead is, yeah, what is the thing you want to be doing? What would you like to be doing with that time and energy? And then how do you do that? And if that obsessive thought is coming up, how is it interfering with that thing you want to be doing? Because by looking at how it interferes with where you want to be going there, sometimes we can see the challenges or the skills we do want to work on. So I always look at, where do you want to go? Because then we see what we need to do to go there. Actually, is asking a partner if it's okay to have a lazy day a reassurance practice? Of course, it always depends, right? Because if we're with people, it is useful to get them on board with our lazy day. Because also they may be like, hey, let's go do something. You're like, oh no, I'm not doing anything. And they'll be like, why? So, that's one of the advantages of the lazy day practice at Plum Village, is that everybody is doing it. So, no, like if there's somebody with us, yeah, you definitely want to, maybe have that conversation about how you can do a lazy day together. Because you still do stuff on a lazy day. It's just that there's nothing planned. And so it's really about saying, hey, with nothing, there's no need to do anything. What do I want to do? And also, I'm not just reacting to whatever comes up inside of me just to fill the space, which is another key component. Because sometimes it's our brain that's like, whoa, this is scary. I'm bored. Let's do something. And then we want to show it, no, brain, you don't have to do anything. John, you said, how come doctors say there's no cure for OCD and it's a disease of the brain, basically that we're screwed, LOL. In part, not all doctors would say that. For years, a lot of it has to do, like I did a good post, or I would say a detailed post. I don't know if it was good. A detailed post on Instagram recently to this question, kind of going through all of the reasons why we have these ideas about mental illness. But a lot of it has to do with stigma. Right? For decades, this is how we approached mental illness, was that, not just decades, centuries, right? If somebody was struggling with something, we saw them as fundamentally flawed somehow, and we locked them up. Because there's this idea like, oh, you can't do anything, you lock them up. And so that concept is like pervasive, but it's not based on anything scientific. So even now, that's why there's no genetic test for OCD or any mental illness. There's no brain scan test. Because there is no evidence. Each time we think we've come up with a new genetic marker, or you see a study that says, we saw this difference in the brains of people who had whatever mental illness, it does not get replicated. And so, for a while we thought, hey, brain scans were going to be this way that we were going to identify mental illness. It did not pan out. And the same has happened with genetics. Every time we think we find a genetic marker, like it used to be a study or kind of example I often use with this is that for years, going back, say, a couple decades, I think it would have been the end of the 90s, the start of the 2000s, we really thought we had identified a depression gene. And so you would see, and there was like a Time magazine cover, the depression gene, and this was a big thing. But then studies started coming out saying, people who have exceptionally good mental health are also more likely to have this gene. And we learned that, hey, this gene isn't something that gives you a mental illness. You're just as likely to have the gene and have really great mental health. And it had much more to do with other factors around the person, like their parents, their environment, and so on. And so what we start to see in the actual science and research is that we just had a lot of myths and assumptions about mental illness. And so that's the thing. Like if somebody said, oh, like there's no, like OCD is chronic, well, there's no evidence for that. Yeah, it's really we are pretty attached to a lot of old ideas. But like from a totally scientific perspective, yeah, like if somebody told you you have a chronic mental illness, like I would ask them why. Like let's go find the thing that's gonna fix it. So that's why I find a fitness approach makes a lot more sense based on, yeah, like that, the studies around the so-called depression gene, which we then found out was not a depression gene. You have genes, and then for a variety of context factors, learned factors, and personal choices, that can end up taking you in a lot of different directions. Just like with physical fitness, some genes that we may see as not being very useful for physical fitness could be to somebody else in a different set of circumstances. And it really seems that mental health works the same way. King of Kings, yeah, you sit here, I feel as mentally strong and the brain has a way to come in again. Is that just the natural process, or can I do something when I'm just exhausted? And so I find making space for that, just again, physical fitness is a great example, like expecting that this work is going to be exhausting. And so I find it really helpful to have a structure around what we're doing, just like we would with fitness. It can be so great when, say we're working with a personal trainer, and so we feel, I am so sore, I'm so exhausted. Yesterday's workout was way too much, and then you come into the trainer and they give you a workout that is going to push on so many of the muscles and joints that are stiff, and you think you can't do it, but yeah, you do it. But at the same time, it's also really useful to have a structured practice around rest. And so what helped me so much was removing my brain from the equation, because I just sucked at identifying those. Like you mentioned delusions earlier, I was really bad at that. If I thought I should keep going, it was probably time to stop. And if I thought I should stop, it was probably time to go even harder. And so I was just, it really helped to learn that I was probably wrong. My perceptions of whether I should go or stop were not very useful. Lutfi said, I created a daily routine checklist containing stuff that's for my health. I did it to not let the brain think and just follow during the day, but I started checking it heavily. Any suggestions to prove on it? Yeah, it's great you're seeing that you're checking it heavily. And what I would look at there is, how do you help yourself not check it? And so I might say that's kind of obvious at first. But what we want to look at there is, what does the brain use to try to convince you to check it? Because there you're going to discover maybe an uncertainty or a fear that you can work on in other areas. For example, if there's a feeling of, if I don't do this checklist right, I'm going to relapse. Really common fear. But of course, if we're reacting to the fear of relapse, we have already relapsed. And that's just going to fuel even more fear. And so it's a great opportunity to look at trusting yourself, to look at handling that uncertainty and really catching that urge to check. And what I would look at there as well, are there other areas in your life where you notice yourself automatically reacting to the brain? Because that's going to be a great way you can practice on this. In those other areas where you would automatically react to the brain, you can start cutting out compulsions there. And then that's going to help you when you feel that urge to check the list. Silent Spaces said, I can vouch for the reverse hierarchy. It was really helpful. Usually the brain will want to go straight to the compulsion list, but instead you can have a list of valued actions to choose instead. Yeah, but it's so important, because again, this is like what we were talking about at the very beginning, that Gabrielle brought up. The brain just wants to control bad things. And so often we approach stuff that way, but that can get us caught in the same trap we're already struggling with, right? whether, we're trying to control and fix compulsions, we're trying to control and fix thoughts, feelings, etc. So shifting the focus to what is the thing that I really want to grow? And I'm just going to grow that bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the compulsions are just things I don't do anymore because I'm giving my time and energy to this thing that I care about. I see some other people on Team Spleen. Way to go, Spleens. Oh, Mimsad, I'm glad you're finding it helpful. I realize I must be like way behind the chat if we're just getting to Team Spleen right now. Steve, I'm not sure I understand your question. So I might, although thank you for enjoying the channel. She said, when we talk out loud or take action, is that the same part of us that is reacting or observing the thoughts in our head? Yeah, what I would look at is just like, why do you have to figure that out? Because that's totally the kind of thing we can get stuck on and like trying to feel certain about. And yeah, I find it, all of that I found, not useful to need to be certain about. I'm just going to go do the things I care about. King's talking about thoughts. He said, true, but some of them seem so logical. This is on like the stuff the brain throws up. Is there a process to get more clarity? No, I found that trying to get more clarity is the problem that actually makes us unclear. Because the more we try to get that clarity, just like with the contamination compulsions we talked about earlier, often it can really help to think of contamination compulsions. Yeah, I'm making this because this is the stuff in our head. It can really help to approach the stuff in our heads in the same way we look at contamination compulsions, because often we get very upset about something being up there that we see as contaminated or unclean or wrong. The same way we'll notice a feeling and be like, that shouldn't be there, I've got to fix it. And it's so useful to start to see what we're doing in our heads is the same thing when we go, I've got to be clear about this. I've got to feel right about it. It's the same as trying to feel right on our hands, for example. Like, I've got to feel right. I've got to feel clean. I've got to be sure. And that's always going to create more of the contaminated feeling or more of the contaminated thoughts. So this is why I find it really helpful to have values outside of our head. I'm going to do the things I value. It's not about me getting a clear feeling about them. Often it'll feel wrong. Often it's going to feel wild. The way I usually describe it is it feels like driving a truck down a hill, not on a road, just down a random hill on a mountain, and you have no brakes, and there's no door, and you have no seatbelt, and the steering doesn't work right, and you're going really fast. And it's wanting to be awesome at that. Because if we're like, whoa, no, I've got to stop the truck and get clarity on where we're going and make this feel right and make it feel safe, it's not. So it's really about embracing it. Be like, no, I want to be the best out of control truck driver down a hill in the world, and learning how to enjoy that. Because we're like, no, like we have that automatic reaction. It's totally understandable, right? That flinch. It feels out of control. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel clear. But then the moment we try to control that, it only feels more unclear and more out of control. Boris said, can you share any tips on how to grow the skills of working from home well? Oh yeah, this is a great one to look at. My friends and family don't see that working from home is a real job, and they feel comfortable to distract me anytime. So there's an interesting element you added in there too, which is friends and family. And so what I would look at there is the setting boundaries, really setting boundaries and you being okay with that it is going to feel uncomfortable sometimes, that, setting those boundaries, sometimes they're going to, be upset and they're going to be annoyed. Oh, why can't you do this right now? You're working from home or something like that. And really, it is really a practice in setting boundaries and learning to say no. And, as somebody who works from home, worked from home before the pandemic, that was something I had to look at because at first I was like, oh, well, if somebody asks me to do anything, I'll just go do it. And starting to see, no, I need to approach it. If I commit to myself that, hey, this is the time when I'm going to be doing this thing, I have to make it, I'm going to make it okay to say to somebody, no, I can't do that right then. I'll come, to your event or whatever after this time. And sometimes that meant, showing up late for other people's things and things like that, or just turning them down and saying no, and really respecting our boundaries, really building, to go back to the question of what do we want to grow, really looking at what you want to grow and protecting that. And sometimes people get upset about that. And that's okay. That's their problem to handle. John, so you asked, do we give ourselves OCD or does it drop out of nowhere, emerge out of nowhere, grow out of nowhere? No, so I don't even find it. I mean, because even the whole idea of OCD, like that is just a term, like in a book made up. It's not like there's no OCD bacteria or virus in you or something like that. And so I find this, like, it's not a useful question to even spend time on, because we know how to get over it and we know how to sustain great mental health. And so I shift the focus to that. Yeah, because trying to go after that uncertainty isn't gonna, like, it's not going to produce any particular, I don't know, benefits. Yeah, would be the simple way to describe it. It's like, going back on, when we're out hiking, to be like, how did we trip on this tree? And like, I'm going to dig up this tree and carry it around with me until I can find out how I tripped on it. That's not going to be useful for moving ahead, especially when we already know how to move things ahead. KF, what's good? Is self-talk related to OCD? Oh, yeah, absolutely. In a bunch of different ways. I mean, one, it can just be a compulsion. It'll often be just like, I used to just talk to myself constantly. It was so surprising and useful to learn that we don't have to be talking to ourselves in our head all the time. I did not know that. You don't have to do that. But then also, there's multiple things. Also, our self-talk is often delusional. It's just wrong. And so the danger there is that we might start to believe it. Like, we might be talking to ourselves very meanly, saying terrible things about ourselves. And it's just wrong, but we'll start to believe it. Also, our self-talk might just inhibit us from doing lots of things we want to do because we talk ourselves out of them. And then also, we'll often talk ourselves into a lot of anxiety, which we then do other compulsions around. And so when we're looking at, what led to a particular compulsion, quite often we might find, I convinced myself to do it. And sometimes it's not that we made ourselves anxious, it's that we told ourselves it was logical. So this goes back to what we were just talking about there, what King of Kings brought up. We can, with self-talk, totally rationalize our way into any compulsions. And so self-talk, we're often we're not telling ourselves things that are useful. It can both be a compulsion, but then also fuel lots of compulsions. So you really be aware of the stories you're telling yourself about yourself, because you might believe them. Surab, you said how to observe your thoughts. Yeah, I would say vigorously and easily. Yeah, easily. Like, we don't have to do extra work around thoughts. Yeah, they're there, just like you would observe clouds outside. You don't actually stop what you're doing to go and look at the clouds and be like, okay, I'm going to go observe them right now and accept them. I see you, clouds. Like, look at that cloud right there. Let's all stop and accept it right now. Right? We don't do that. It's just there. Yeah, it's there. It's fine. And we carry on. We give our attention to the things that we care about. MD Firdaus, he said, I think my anxiety is affecting my health and digestive system. Also, I'm not able to think clearly. What do you think? Does anxiety do such things? Huge. I didn't even realize that I struggled with digestive issues until after getting over OCD, because the digestive issues had been there my entire life, and now they're not, and that is great. Didn't even know. That's actually, I can't remember who asked it before, and I forgot to touch on it. Somebody asked earlier about sex and libido, and I didn't skip it because I was going to come back to it, and then I forgot. It was between two questions, and this is related to this, though. Digestive issues, but also there's all sorts of different ways that mental illness will interact with, things like sex, libido, the works. Everything is so much better now taking care of my mental health. It's it really is. It works its way into everything. And so absolutely. And we even kind of, one of the ways we even have this in our language, in English, is that, when we talk about butterflies in our stomach, if we're cultivating butterflies in our stomachs all the time with anxiety, then of course that's going to mess up our stomachs. And I think, it totally made sense, actually. Now I'm not, because when I would get anxious in the past, it often was it was a full body anxiety thing, and I was always anxious. And so, now I'm not. And it's just noticing, now because I'm not anxious, I don't have that feeling in the pit of my stomach all the time. That feeling in the pit of my stomach was probably not doing good things to my stomach. Using the toilet works much better now than when I struggled with mental illness. That's all I'll say about that. We don't need any exact details. But taking care of your mental health is really good for your everything down here. That's why too, when I see people talking about food and like doing stuff around the digestive system to approach mental health, I understand where that comes from. But there I would say, if it doesn't matter how much good stuff you eat, if you're then doing all sorts of compulsions that make you anxious. It could be useful. I like to eat healthy. It's always useful to fuel doing awesome things, but really look at how you're messing with your digestive system from up here. Because if we don't change that, we don't change how we're doing that, then of course we'll keep growing families of butterflies in our guts. As Erica was saying here, I find it helpful to treat all thoughts as the same and not try to put labels on them like logical or illogical. Let any thought be there. Well, you do what you value. They're just thoughts. And Marlos, I see you saying there, you're going to go steal happiness. Please do. Mm-hmm. Nicole, you're heading off to Plum Village. I think I have to say it might still be closed right now, but if you check out Plum Village's website, they've been doing a lot of online retreats. I know they had one coming up on grief. It might have already passed, or it may be coming up. But they've been doing a lot of great retreats on particular topics that I know we often discuss as a community. And so, really useful to check out the Plum Village website. And you can join in a virtual retreat and enjoy the practice that way. It can be really valuable. Super committee, welcome. Winsome, of course we are still going. Yes, as Erica said, the questions are slowing down. It takes me time to keep up. Oh, Steve, thank you for watching the videos. Super committee said, I went to go see if I had OCD and they said no. Still wondering why my voices are conversations in the past, but I'll still come and hang out. Well, this is not a hangout for people with any particular diagnosis. So I actually don't find diagnoses particularly helpful. Because they're not and I said diagnoses around physical illnesses can be, I would say, extremely helpful, but they're I would say more scientific. And so diagnoses around mental illnesses, we know from research you can go to multiple different professionals and get multiple different diagnoses. And so, yeah, I find it way more helpful to shift the focus to the skills we want to build. And again, just like we do in physical fitness, you don't need a diagnosis to go to the gym. We don't talk about like, oh, hey, what disorder are you trying to overcome at the gym? And we're like, oh, well, I have a comorbid endurance disorder and a weakness disorder. Like, oh, will I ever overcome them? My doctor says that my endurance disorder is chronic. And yeah, like, because last summer I got over my endurance disorder, but then the winter came and the winter made me relapse, and now it's my endurance disorder come back. And right, the whole model of approaching mental illness that way, I think doesn't make sense. If we approach physical fitness that way, we would all have chronic disorders. Does not make sense. Yo, Sony Pictures UK. You said, how are you? It's been a long time. Good to see you again after a long time. I really want to know your OCD tips in live. Well, welcome. Then below you said OCD, or no, only when releases dopamine, OCD ends at a particular time, but our frenemy always pops up to give more stuff. Yeah, so can you explain like what kind of tips you'd be looking for exactly? Super committee. Continuing on from yeah, you said that said you didn't have OCD. So still an option maybe. I do, and I'm just explaining it wrong. Would like to know more about avoidance and reassurance and how often you'd have to do it and stuff. Yeah. And then Erica, yeah, down below said super committee. Lots of us don't have any official diagnosis. The general approach works for anything. Accept the thoughts, feelings, and other brain stuff, and take action on what we value. And the super committee said, Erica, I see I'm on the search to exposure. I'm usually trying to avoid thinking things. So OCD and exposure. Yeah, super committee. So even above, you said like on the topic of avoidance and reassurance and how often you'd have to do it. Yeah, it wouldn't be about that. And even in the thing they'd be looking at in the diagnosis actually wouldn't have anything to do with that. They'd be looking at impairment in your life. So yeah, what are the things you want to be doing, and how are thoughts getting in the way of that? Or compulsions, like how are obsessions and compulsions getting in the way of doing the things you want to do? And it's much more, it's much more about that they'd be looking at. Yeah, so there's no perfect number or anything like that. And in fact, and that's something you'll find. I'd say that's one of the issues with the way we do diagnoses, that it's not actually based on anything objective. It's more about how bothered you are by it. So somebody could have some compulsions that, we talk all the time on here about, yeah, like this is how you cut it out. And we'll have lots of people who've cut it out, but then somebody else, might be struggling with the same compulsions, and they're just like, my life is shut down because of this and I can't function. And so they would be, that's going to be labeled as more severe, whereas it's not actually connected to any, particular set of practices or anything like that. Yeah, King of Kings said, how do you let go of that self-talk? I find the way to start practicing on this is to start practicing on it with things we think we like talking about. So one of the ways that it really helped me was recognizing that if I was just going for a walk somewhere, I would actually, before the walk, think about what am I going to think about on the walk, because I saw it as somehow, wasted time. I needed to be doing something in my head. And so it was starting to make those opportunities to practice mindfulness. And so it wasn't that I was thinking about, bad things or distressing things. I just all of the time was talking in my head. So I had to start looking at the ways I could practice not doing stuff in my head. It's probably around simple moments during your day. One thing I often suggest to people is to identify a chunk of time during the day when you do something pretty consistently. So maybe it's a walk to the gym or something like that. And I designate that as mindfulness practice time. It's great to be practicing mindfulness all the other time. But by identifying a particular chunk of time and saying, this is mindfulness practice time, it gives us that reminder that during that time, we're really not going to do anything in our heads. We can just be quiet. And we don't have to talk to ourselves. And then from there, we can grow that time and take that practice into other areas of our life. But it's not just about cutting out self-talk around stuff we dislike. Often the place to begin is with stuff we like or we see as, necessary, again, like rational. Yeah, I get it. Shane, Jade, thank you so much for the donation and the emoji or GIF, the little characters. They're awesome. A high five to you. Thank you so much for the support. I like your little UFO beside your name too. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Oh, Crystal said here, when the ERP backfires so hard, how do you overcome it? It seems unbelievable, impossible. Yeah, so whatever was happening there around ERP, I would watch out for that. That to me sounds like the ERP itself was probably not actually ERP. Like if you were doing exposures, that's probably, so one thing is usually when people say, hey, how do I do exposures for X, Y, Z, for our American audience? Or they're like, what's the right exposure for this? Or you're just exposing yourself to things because you hope by exposing yourself that's going to make feelings and thoughts go away. That's a compulsion, big time. And so it's always going to backfire, or it's going to backfire eventually. ERPs really look at, and I don't know how this happens. Hopefully somebody does a study on this somehow. So there used to be this type of therapy called exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is not exposure and response prevention, but somehow at some point, a whole bunch of professionals who were trained in exposure therapy saw that the research was saying ERP was effective. And so a whole bunch of people trained in exposure therapy started to say, hey, I do ERP. But then what they were actually doing was exposure therapy. And this has created this kind of online, I don't know what you would call it, online discussion of people sharing exposure therapy exercises, which they're calling ERP, and then it leads to people doing exposures, and they create more of the problems. So it really helps to look at ERP and doing the response prevention element of that. Because then it can't backfire. Whatever the brain throws up, we're not going to do compulsions around it. That's what ERP is about. Yeah. So I hope some historian of psychiatry is studying how types of therapies evolve and names get changed and they get used in different ways that's disconnected from the research. It is fascinating. Super committee. Yeah, he said, I definitely said I felt like I was being spied on, and that came out the doctor's a schizophrenic, so people can, yeah, because people were there and they were people that were close and could easily hurt my feelings. Yeah, this, like, one of the things I always bring up is how I was so lucky that I didn't go and talk about the symptoms I was dealing with doctors, or even at the time when I went to get help. I was struggling with all sorts of compulsions around paranoia, but I believed the paranoia so completely that people were trying to poison me, that I was being watched and people were going to attack me, that I never brought it up in therapy because it was real. So it never occurred to me to say, oh, I struggle with the fear that people are trying to kill me, because I was like, it was real. So even when I would go to therapy, I had this thing, now I realize, and then eventually realized it was compulsion, where I would leave my apartment and come back by different ways to mess with the people who were watching me. So I was, practicing all of these paranoia compulsions while going to therapy. It never occurred to me that it was paranoia. But yeah, of course, if I had been talking about that in particular settings, that probably wouldn't have gone over. Yeah, like that I wasn't using knives because I was going to kill people, all of that stuff. It's really great that I talked about the symptoms I had where I did, but also that I never mentioned a lot of symptoms. Because if I had, the treatment journey might have been very, very different. Padma, I'm well. Thank you for asking. Neon Purple, well, thank you. And I'm glad, yeah, you got the cat in the box there. I love that. Why do cats love boxes so much? Cats look so cute in boxes. I love that the internet is mostly cats in boxes. And I mean, obviously, there's other stuff like more cats. Z1. Any advice on real event OCD? I did some dumb stuff when I was a kid, and whenever someone shows a picture from 4 years ago, the first thing that enters my mind is the thing I did. And I can't enjoy looking back at my childhood from ages 11 to 14 without thinking about the stupid things I did. Yeah, Z1, maybe, or Z1, however you pronounce your name. You can let us know how you pronounce your name with an American accent or Canadian accent. We were talking about this earlier, so yeah, you might want to go back and check the stream earlier if you missed it, but I'll cover a bit of it right now. I found the healing the inner child meditation, and so I have a variation I call healing the inner screw up child, and it's about recognizing that we do make choices that later we're like, oh, I did not want to make that, and it really hurts to remember that experience, but that then becomes limiting in the present. Because we're about to step into something, we're reminded of that painful experience, and we shut down, we lock up. We want to learn how to touch that pain. And so a healing the inner child meditation is a great practice to bring love and kindness and understanding and compassion back to ourselves, back in that experience in the past, and reach out to ourselves. Give ourselves a hug, say, hey, yeah, I understand you, like, we get what happened here. We don't want to be reminded of this. I understand why it happened, and I'm going to show you how to do things differently now. And isn't it great that in the present, with this awareness and my skill to touch this pain, that I can make better choices now? And by developing the skill to touch that pain, I equip myself to not repeat the same experiences, the same choices, the same mistakes from the past. And so learning how to touch trauma is so useful. This is an area where this actually connects to, say, things happening in the news. Because countries make mistakes in the past and do really painful things. And so, here in Canada, that's something that the country is struggling with right now. And I think it's so useful to look at how we learn to deal with pain ourselves from the past. And it's so important to learn how to touch that trauma. Right, so Canada has a long history of genocide against Indigenous people. We're finding all of these mass graves of children that the government, killed through a campaign of taking Indigenous kids away from their families and putting them in what they called residential schools at the time. But so many kids died, and so many communities were devastated by that. And it's really important as a country that we learn how to touch that pain and not make those same mistakes here in the present. Because by trying to ignore that, we're simply going to perpetuate the trauma again. And so, whether it's individually or as communities, it's so important that we learn how to touch pain and be aware of it and understand it, and make changes in the present with that understanding. And without developing the skill to touch it, we just keep repeating those traumatic cycles, whether it's trauma that we brought to other people or trauma that was brought onto us. Mm-hmm. So let's touch painful experiences from the past with love and kindness and understanding, and make changes now. Nicole said, I am returning to work in mental health and I want to drop the diagnosis, but I'll be required as a huge part of my job. I'm glad someone like me with personal experience is going to be in this role. Absolutely. That's great. And of course, the diagnoses, they serve all sorts of purposes. Like, depending on where we are, a diagnosis is really key for getting, insurance, accessing therapy, things like that. So absolutely. Like, we're not, I think, there's no having as kind of a rallying cry, like let's get rid of diagnoses or something like that. Not really that not that useful. And so yeah, we interact with them. They're a language that helps us navigate a particular space. So they have their uses, and then when it's more useful to drop them, yeah, we drop them. Padma is that I think of embarrassing events and cringe real hard. Yeah, and so it's that. It's starting, I call it the flinch, starting to notice that flinch. It's very natural. It's going to be automatic. And then turning towards it and be like, okay, yeah, I get it. I know why we flinched, but hey, we can touch that. We can understand why it's scary. We can understand why we don't like to look at it. Boris, thank you. Dallas said, any tips on relationship OCD? Again, yeah, really, with all the other all the other stuff, it's so useful. I found it so helpful. I struggled with that, to stop listening to my brain. I think this is one area where we seem to really think we should listen to and believe the random thoughts and feelings and stuff the brain throws up. But it really helped me to recognize, oh, my brain's constantly throwing up feelings that aren't real, or not having feelings when they might be there otherwise. So just relying on believing the stuff in my head, not something I could do. So it really helps with relationships to look at what we value, just like anywhere else. And so if you're in a relationship, a couple, I always suggest developing a set of relationship values together. What do you want to build and grow and create together? And then, yeah, we practice noticing what the brain throws up and giving our time and energy to those things we care about. Kaya said, is OCD the only mental illness that comes with intrusive thoughts? I went to a psychologist and she said that I might have it, but don't get compulsions, but I do have anxiety and depression. No, intrusive thoughts, because intrusive thoughts are a compulsion, right? Where a thought comes up and we judge it and we react to it. And so you could look at any mental illness diagnosis as involving that. Right? There's going to be some brain stuff, and the person's going to go, oh, this means I should do XYZ. And then they go and do it. And that's an intrusive thought. Yeah. No, so across the board. And the only thing that changes is how we talk about it. Mm-hmm. Z1 from the UK. There you go. Now we know. I think I said a Canadian or an American accent, but yeah, I will say it with British accent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Erica brought up a great point here. Even judging a thought as intrusive is probably a compulsion. Yeah, I always find it is. Thoughts are like clouds; they're just there while we go about our day. Yeah, when we're judging a thought, that's actually where the compulsion is. When we're like, "Oh, this thought shouldn't be there," and so it's actually not a problem with the thought. That's like us going out and saying, like, "How do I deal with intrusive clouds?" No, like they are just clouds. We are the one going, "Ooh, that's bad. It shouldn't be there." Oh, King of Kings, I'm glad you found this valuable. Mm-hmm. We are coming to the end, everyone. We went long today. This is more than 2 hours. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Sony Pictures, you may have the last question here. Let's see. You said, I have OCD about when I start any new stuff or work, I think about good people. Things drastically leads to thinking always bad stuff, unable to do work in time or finish it, repeating again. Every time I have compulsions to think good stuff only, but it leads so much stress, I can't stop it. Even now, typing, I am repeating so much to type. Give me some tips on it. Yeah, so that right there, like anytime you try to control thoughts, that's always going to create more struggle. Mental health is about having any thought or feeling. So yeah, like needing to think things, to do things, that's just going to create so much struggle. So really starting to practice There's all sorts of exercises you can do to identify, something like writing, and then just practice writing without doing those compulsions in your head. Yeah. Or anything. It could be anything you think you can't do unless you have the right thoughts. Go and do it. Do it with the wrong thoughts. Think about whatever your brain thinks about, and do the things you want to do. Because as long as you hold on to that idea of having particular brain stuff, it's going to create so much struggle. So let's wrap it up there, everybody. Claps all around. Everybody enjoy your weekend. I know some of you, I don't know if it's a long weekend in the US, so maybe not a lot of people here from the US today. If you are, I hope you're having a good long weekend. And let's go and have any brain stuff. Yeah, like Erica just said, let's do stuff while having wrong thoughts. That's the name of the week. And let's touch pain. Whether it's something painful that happened to us or something we did to others, something we've done as a community, let's touch it. Because in learning how to contact that pain and bring understanding to it, we can make changes in the present that are good for all of us. So really enjoy that practice. And it can be a difficult practice, but the benefits are huge. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming by. For everybody who donated today, thank you so much. I appreciate the support. And it's awesome to always be connecting with you all around these awesome skills we work on from all over the world with our super, super fun, squishy urge blobs. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming by. Have a good week of doing the things with the brain stuff, and I'll see you soon.